Hello and welcome to this quick tutorial. So I'm going to just press X here and delete my default cube, and N, put on my screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go to front orthographic by pressing 1 and 5 on the numpad, and I'm going to add a plane. I'm going to go into edit mode, W, merge, and add center. So I have a single vertex. I'm going to go extrude, extrude. I'm going to keep this nice and simple. And this particular technique that we're looking at is called lathing. After the, I suppose, the wooden equivalent, where you would take a piece of wood and you would turn it, and then using, say, a chisel, you would make a leg of a chair or something cylindrical like that. So I'm going to select all of my vertices, and the key to this is to spin it on the right axis. So I'm going to go 7 and look from the top, and it spins around the 3D cursor here. So if your 3D cursor is not in the right place, it won't work. So if I hit spin now, I'll get a very funny result. So we'll make sure the cursor is at 0, 0, 0. So 0, 0, 0, and then we'll press spin. And now we have the properties of the spin here. So I'm going to put in 360 because I want it to be a full circle, and I'll give it, say, 12 segments. And there is my glass. Now I'm going to give it a subdivision surface modifier. It's going to make it smoother, and I'm going to here hit smooth. Oh, I have to select it all first. So select it all and go smooth faces. Now, so that's my model of my glass. Now, what we did in class was we jumped into the cycles render engine, and then we went to materials. So there's a default material. Every time you open Blender, there is a default material. So I can use that one. If I select that one, I'll have to click use nodes, because by default it starts with Blender render, and this material is not a node based, it's not a cycles render material, but I can convert it to one. So I'm going to click use nodes, although the alternative is to press plus or new if you don't have this one selected, and start a new one. So I'm going to go new and change this to the node editor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit X and delete those two nodes there, and we'll start from 0. So the nodes are a bit like the logic bricks. They're kind of linked together, and we can use Shift A to add like before. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to add a shader, and that shader is going to be glass. So here's my glass shader, and now I need to output that. So I've got output, and I've got two outputs, and the one we're looking for is material output. And I link this to the surface. We will look at volumetric shading another day. That's if you want to make a cloud or a gas, and then displacement is using shaders to change the shape of the geometry. So, but we'll look at them another day. So literally I've just gone a glass shader and a material output, and now I'm going to say go to rendered mode, and we have a piece of glass. Now before we examine it in too much detail, I'm going to go back to the top, and I'm going to add a plane, and I'm just going to scale it by 5 or scale it up. And with this one I'm going to go new, and I'm going to call this floor. And I'm not going to change this one. I'm not going to change the nodes. I'm just going to make it a darker shade of brown. So we have something to contrast our glass against. So there's our glass. I've selected glass now, and we should call this glass. Let's rename this. Okay, and the glass, the object we started with, we should call that glass to get into the habit of naming things correctly. So here's our glass, and as you can see, we get all sorts of interesting, the light behaves correctly as it passes through, and we can change the properties of the glass. So change it from being glass to being something closer to crystal. And about 1.4 I think is the default. And again, we can change the roughness of it. So it's more like a frosted glass maybe that you'd find in someone's bathroom. Or we can have it very smooth on the outside. Now, again, I'm going to go back to, I'm in rendered mode now. So in rendered mode, I can zoom out here. I can't see the camera or the light. But obviously we have a shadow cast here, so there's something going on. So I'll go back to solid mode. Here's my lamp. So I was going to place that in between by pressing G, the camera and the object. And now I'm going to look through the camera. We can't see everything, so I'm going to go up here. There's a great little tool here, lock camera to view. And now when I use the mouse and the middle mouse wheel to move around, I'm actually positioning the camera, and that'll turn it off. So this is what the camera sees, and we'll go to rendered mode. And we're just going to render out a picture of this. So we're going to have a quick look at some render settings. So at the moment my screen is set up to, or my computer is set up to render off the CPU, which is an AMD processor, which is fast enough but not too fast. So I'm going to change to GPU compute. If you don't have that option and you do have a good graphics card, go to File, User Preferences, System, and turn on CUDA, and then you'll see the graphics card. So mine is a GTX 760 graphics card, which is, okay. I should get a new one. But this allows me then to select the graphics card as the computing object. I'm going to set my still frame to be 100%, so it's 1920 by 1080, which is a single frame of a HD video. My frames per second don't matter because I'm only going to render out one frame. I'm going to go down here. PNG is a file format of for a still image. That's fine. And down here it says film. So I'm going to click transparent, and when I do, the background will become transparent here. Very good. And then I'm going to change my sampling. So the amount of sampling will determine the quality of the picture. Now there's other factors involved, but that's kind of the main one. At the moment the preview, which is what we see here in the window, is set to 32. So if I change that to say 2 and I move around, there's a lot more noise. If you look at the base here of the glass, an awful lot more noise. You can see samples 2 of 2. And if I increase that to say 50, you can see that noise goes away. Now we get other interesting features, which are sometimes called fireflies. I normally set that to 10 because it is simply a preview. So the quality here, it's just meant to be kind of give you an indicative image. It's not a final image. And then the samples for the finished render are 120. So I'm going to up that to 200. Now if we put that up too high, it'll take too long to render. So it's always going to be a battle of rendering time versus the quality of the image. And then lastly, I'm going to go to performance. I'm going to change these to 512. And this is the size of the squares rendered, so the kind of the size of the area that each when it goes to the GPU, that it's going to work out piece by piece. The bigger these are, the quicker it'll render, but if you make it very complex, your image, if you have smoke and hair and all sorts of things going on, you'll find that you'll run out of RAM on your graphics card. So again, a bit of a compromise. So as big as you can make them without overloading the graphics card. So with those changes in mind, I'm going to set now my destination for output, and I'll put it onto my desktop. I'm just going to call it glass. Okay, and it's going to be a PNG file when I render it. So I'm going to go render. So this is it rendering now at its 200 samples, so you can see it's working out each piece. So this will be far from a good render with all of these fireflies in it. We'll examine another day how to get rid of them. But for now, this is just an example of what we can do. Okay, so here's our render done. I'm going to go image, save as image, and again we'll call it glass, and we'll put it on our desktop, and we'll go save. So this is our completed glass using a lathing technique.